Let's take a closer look now at the day's top stories. Joining me, Parnell Palm McGuinness, Managing Director at strategic communications firm Agenda C, and Ben Oquist, Executive Director at the Australia Institute. Parnell, first to you, what did you make of the Prime Minister's energy announcements today? His language is certainly shifting. He's taking his party room on a journey as well as he talks about this net zero emissions future.
He really is, and I think it's actually quite skillfully done. You've really got to give him kudos for solving a problem that the Coalition has been struggling with for over a decade by moving incrementally along a technology pathway that a lot of the Coalition can buy into, and taking the population along with him on that as well. So there's a really clear map of how this links to jobs, how this is a practical path forward, and it's going to get us to where we need to go, but in a measured way.
Ben Oquist, this $500 million commitment today, you're talking big dollars, although the carbon capture commitment's over 10 years, but still it's heading in, as Vicky Treadle said, the High Commissioner of Britain, heading in the right direction, albeit nowhere near as ambitious as Boris Johnson was overnight.
Now, of course, the real danger of the announcement is the money end up actually going to back in fossil fuels. Carbon capture and storage has been a monumental failure, $1.3 billion invested over the last year with no real result. It's failed every target that's been set for it internationally. Here in Australia, there's been massive problems with it. The Gorgon gas field development has been a kind of basically a scandal. So the worry is that the rest of the world puts this kind of tsunami of pressure on Australia, and the Biden summit is just the start. We've got the G7, the G20, we've got the Pacific Island Forum coming up, we've got the IEA with new net zero modelling coming up, and then of course the Boris Johnson big summit at the end of the year. The worry is this tsunami of international pressure, other countries moving forward with credible targets to actually reduce emissions, and all we've got from Australia is money for effectively fossil fuels, and that's with the hydrogen announcement too. No guarantee today that the money will be spent on clean green hydrogen, and while we can talk about rhetoric and whether there's a shifting rhetoric, in the end it's the substance that counts, and Australia doesn't have any credible plan to get to net zero, or critically, and I've said this before, the debate is going to be about the 2030 target. Biden's going to put big new pressure with a big new 2030 target, and Australia's got nothing.
Well, Parnell, and as we touched on at the outset, the PM has got these competing interests. He does have that balancing act with the domestic politics to deal with, but I do get the sense that he is shifting to a more ambitious footing, particularly in the context of allies like the UK committing to 78% reduction by 2035. And as Ben said there, overnight tonight, President Biden expected to ramp up the ambition quite significantly.
I'm sure. And look, countries across the world are ramping up the ambition, and they're not living up to their own targets. So that is something that I think the Prime Minister is trying to avoid with this, is setting a target and then failing against it. And we've seen that in Germany, we've seen that in the UK, and I dare say the US is going to be more rhetoric on this than actual delivery. You know, where they have made big inroads into reducing emissions has been through shale gas. So through fracking and methods that haven't really taken off in Australia. And we have to, I'm sure that Biden wants to set a mark on this. He wants to have a turnaround from the Trump era. But we have to look at what is actually then being done by countries, not just what they say they're going to do and then ending up, as Germany has, for instance, using brown coal again because they've gotten rid of some types of technology that could have gotten them closer to low emissions.
And one of the big, well, not one of, the biggest nation in that context is China, isn't it, Ben? That the US will want to see credible evidence that China is moving on that, because they are still building coal-fired power stations.
Look, China's going to have to do more, the US is going to have to do more, Australia's going to have to do more. I think that was a big significant breakthrough this week, signs that the US was going to cooperate with China, not fight with them, and that's a big breakthrough. Overall, I think what Australia hasn't grasped with is that renewables are making electricity and energy cheaper. If you want cheaper power now, you need to get into renewables faster. Australia is not going to become a renewable energy superpower unless we invest more in renewables and do it faster. I think former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd and Malcolm Turnbull's intervention this week is actually big. They've called for higher targets, no new coal mines, critically, no subsidies for fossil fuels. And that's the danger with today's announcement. The rule is here, first do no harm. And unfortunately, governments, not just China but Australia, are still doing harm, and investing in fossil fuel subsidies is exactly the wrong thing to do.
Ben Oquist and Parnell Palm-McGuinness, thank you both, appreciate it.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.